The wealthiest place on earth is not the gold mines of South America or the oil fields of the Middle East. The wealthiest place on earth is the graveyard. In the graveyard, you will find inventions that were never exposed to the world, brilliant ideas that were never executed, businesses that were never launched, books that were never written, and songs that were never sung. They are buried there because people let their fear, their comfort, or their endless distractions stop them from pouring out their best work while they were still alive. They took their brilliance to the grave. Welcome. Today, we are going to talk about a concept that will fundamentally shift the way you look at your time, your work, and your life. It is the philosophy behind Todd Henry's brilliant book, Die Empty. Now, when you hear the phrase, die empty, your first reaction might be resistance. It sounds exhausting. It sounds like a recipe for the kind of toxic hustle culture that leaves us burnt out, stressed, and running on fumes. But that is a complete misunderstanding of the concept. Dying empty is not about working yourself to death, nor is it about burning the candle at both ends until there is nothing left of you but ash. Dying empty is about intentionality. It is about waking up every single day and making the deliberate choice to pour out your best self, your best focus, and your best energy into the things that truly matter, so that when your time eventually comes, you leave this world completely empty of the potential you were given. You leave nothing on the table. You leave no what-ifs behind. Most people live their lives operating under the dangerous illusion of someday. Someday, I will write that book. Someday, I will start that business. Someday, I will spend more time with my family. Someday, I will finally get serious about my health, my art, or my legacy. We treat time as if it is an infinitely renewable resource. We assume that there will always be a tomorrow to do the things we are putting off today. But the harsh reality of human existence is that our time is finite. The days are ticking by, and every day that you go to sleep with your best work still inside you is a day you have lost forever. Todd Henry wrote this book to snap us out of that trance. He wrote it to provide a framework for emptying ourselves of our best work every single day, building a body of work that we can be profoundly proud of.
To understand how to die empty, we first have to understand the anatomy of our work. Everything we do can be broken down into three distinct kinds of work. If you want to live a life of deep impact and fulfillment, you have to find a harmonious balance between all three. Todd Henry calls them mapping, making, and meshing. Let us start with mapping. Mapping is the work before the work. It is the planning, the plotting, and the strategizing. It is the time you spend setting your goals, prioritizing your tasks, and figuring out exactly how you are going to attack the day, the week, or the year. Without mapping, you are just running fast in the dark. You might be incredibly busy, answering emails, running to meetings, checking off to-do lists, but you are not actually making progress on anything that matters. You are moving, but you are not advancing. Mapping is the quiet, essential work of stepping back, looking at the big picture, and asking yourself what truly needs to be done. It is deciding what your most important battles are before you step onto the battlefield.
But mapping alone is not enough. If all you do is plan, you become a chronic procrastinator disguised as a strategist. That brings us to the second kind of work, making. Making is exactly what it sounds like. It is the execution. It is the actual, tangible work of writing the words, writing the code, building the product, having the difficult conversation, and doing the heavy lifting. Making is where the rubber meets the road. It requires deep focus, discipline, and the willingness to push through resistance. Many people struggle with making because it is hard.
It is much easier to sit around and map out a brilliant plan than it is to actually sit down and do the exhausting work of bringing that plan into reality. But without making, your ideas remain just that, ideas. They stay locked in your head, slowly decaying, until they are buried with you in the graveyard.
The third kind of work is the one that most people completely neglect, and that is meshing. Meshing is the work between the work. It is the time you spend acquiring new skills, reading, learning, resting, and allowing your brain to synthesize new information. Meshing is how you grow. It is how you refill the well so that you have something valuable to pour out when it is time to make. If you are constantly mapping and making, but you never take the time to mesh, you will eventually stagnate. Your ideas will become stale. You will end up recycling the same old thoughts and solutions because you haven't brought any new raw materials into your brain. Meshing is not slacking off. It is deliberate growth. It is exposing yourself to new art, new perspectives, and new challenges that stretch your capabilities.
When you balance mapping, making, and meshing, you create an engine for sustainable brilliance. You know where you are going. You are doing the work to get there, and you are constantly upgrading your skills along the way. But even with this knowledge, many of us still fail to do our best work. Why? Because the path to mediocrity is incredibly slippery. We do not usually wake up one day and decide to abandon our dreams. It happens slowly. It happens in micro-compromises. It happens when we give in to the invisible forces that constantly pull us toward the path of least resistance. Todd Henry identifies these invisible forces as the 7 deadly sins of mediocrity. These are the subtle, everyday traps that slowly drain our potential and ensure that we go to the grave with our best work still inside us. If we want to die empty, we have to learn how to recognize these sins and aggressively fight back against them.
The first deadly sin of mediocrity is aimlessness. Aimlessness is the disease of the drifter. It is what happens when you have no clear through line in your life. You wake up, you react to whatever urgent thing is screaming for your attention. You scroll through your phone, you do whatever your boss or your clients demand of you, and then you go to sleep. You survive the day, but you do not design the day. Aimlessness is incredibly dangerous because it feels like living. You are still breathing, you are still busy, but you have no trajectory. You are a ship floating on the ocean without a rudder, completely at the mercy of the wind and the currents. To combat aimlessness, you must define your battles. You have to decide what is actually worth fighting for. You need a clear, compelling vision for what you are trying to build with your life, and you need to align your daily actions with that vision. You cannot simply accept whatever life throws at you. You have to dictate the terms of your own engagement.
The second deadly sin is boredom. We often think of boredom as a lack of things to do, but in the context of our life's work, boredom is actually a lack of curiosity. It is the feeling of being uninspired by your own life. When you fall into the trap of boredom, you start phoning it in. You do the bare minimum required to get by. You stop asking questions. You stop trying to improve. You just show up, punch the clock, and wait for the day to end. Boredom is a silent killer of potential because it convinces you that you already know everything there is to know about your work and your world. The antidote to boredom is fierce curiosity. You have to train yourself to be fascinated by the world around you. You have to ask why and how relentlessly. If you are bored with your work, it is not because the work is inherently boring. It is because you have stopped looking for ways to make it better,
faster, or more interesting. You must take responsibility for your own engagement. You have to inject passion into the task rather than waiting for the task to magically inspire you.
The third deadly sin is comfort. Comfort is perhaps the most seductive of all the traps, because comfort is exactly what we have been taught to strive for. We want the comfortable house, the comfortable salary, the comfortable routine. But while physical comfort is a nice luxury, intellectual and creative comfort is a death sentence for your potential. When you get too comfortable, you stop taking risks. You stop stretching yourself. You stay in your safe little lane because you are terrified of failing, looking foolish, or losing what you have acquired. But growth only happens in a state of discomfort. If you want to die empty, you have to learn to embrace the tension of the unknown. You have to willingly walk into spaces where you do not have all the answers. You have to risk failure. The moment you catch yourself saying, "But we have always done it this way," or "I am good enough at this, I do not need to push harder," alarm bells should be ringing in your head. Comfort is the enemy of greatness. You must constantly seek out new challenges that force you to adapt and evolve.
The fifth deadly sin is ego. Ego is the arrogant belief that you have arrived. It is the obsession with your own status, your own title, and your own reputation. When ego takes over, you stop serving the work and you start serving yourself. You become rigid. You stop listening to feedback because you believe you are the smartest person in the room. You become defensive when your ideas are challenged. Ego makes you fragile because your entire identity is tied up in being right and being praised. To defeat ego, you must cultivate deep, authentic humility. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking of yourself less. It is shifting your focus away from your own glory and toward the value you are trying to create for others. It is the willingness to be a beginner again, to ask dumb questions, and to admit when you are wrong. The greatest creators and innovators in the world are not driven by ego. They are driven by a desperate desire to solve problems and serve a mission greater than themselves. The sixth deadly sin is fear. Fear is the great paralyzer. It is the voice in your head that whispers, "What if you fail? What if they laugh at you? What if you lose everything?" Fear causes us to hold back our best ideas. It causes us to play it safe, to blend into the crowd, and to avoid putting our true selves out into the world. Fear is the primary reason the graveyard is so incredibly wealthy. People let the fear of rejection, the fear of judgment, and the fear of the unknown stop them from living the life they were meant to live. But here is the secret about fear. It never goes away. The goal is not to eliminate fear, because that is impossible. The goal is to act in spite of it. You have to realize that the pain of regret, the pain of reaching the end of your life and realizing you never truly lived, is infinitely worse than the temporary pain of failure or rejection. You must learn to harness your fear, to use it as a compass that points you toward the very things you need to be doing. If a project or an idea terrifies you, that is usually a strong indicator that it is exactly what you should be pursuing. The seventh and final deadly sin is guardedness. Guardedness is the tendency to isolate yourself, to hoard your ideas, and to build walls around your work. It comes from a mindset of scarcity.
We become guarded when we believe that there is a limited amount of success to go around, and if we share our knowledge or our connections, someone else might steal our thunder. So we keep our heads down, we refuse to collaborate, and we operate in a silo. But guardedness ultimately suffocates your creativity. Brilliant work is rarely created in total isolation. It is born from collision, the collision of different ideas, different perspectives, and different minds. To overcome guardedness, you must adopt an attitude of relentless generosity. You have to share your ideas freely. You have to collaborate openly. You have to be willing to give away your best stuff, trusting that the act of giving will actually generate more ideas and more opportunities. When you open yourself up to the world opens itself up to you.
These 7 sins, aimlessness, boredom, comfort, delusion, ego, fear, and guardedness, are the enemies of dying empty. They are constantly lurking, waiting for you to drop your guard so they can pull you back into the warm, numbing embrace of mediocrity. Overcoming them is not a one-time event. It is a daily, lifelong practice. It requires extreme vigilance and a systematic approach to how you manage your days. So, how do we actually do this? How do we build a life where we consistently pour out our best work and ensure that we are not stockpiling our potential for a tomorrow that may never come? Todd Henry outlines several incredibly practical daily habits to help us stay on track. First, you must define your daily battles. Every single morning, before you check your email, before you look at social media, before you let the demands of the world dictate your schedule, you must sit down and define exactly what you are going to conquer that day. You need to identify the most important tasks, the making, that will actually move the needle in your life. You have to separate the vital few from the trivial many. If you have a list of 20 things to do, you have to ask yourself, which 2 or 3 things on this list, if completed, will make the biggest impact on your long-term goals? Those are your battles for the day. You must attack them with ruthless focus and defend your time against the endless interruptions and distractions that will inevitably try to pull you away.
Second, you need to establish checkpoints. A checkpoint is a scheduled moment of reflection where you step back from the chaos of doing and evaluate how you are operating. It is a time for mapping and meshing. You should have weekly checkpoints where you review your progress, analyze what went wrong, and plan for the week ahead. But you also need deeper, quarterly checkpoints where you ask yourself the hard questions. Are you drifting into aimlessness? Have you become too comfortable? Are you hiding behind your ego or your fear? Checkpoints are your early warning system. They allow you to catch yourself drifting off course before you end up miles away from where you want to be. They are the moments where you course correct and realign your daily actions with your overarching vision.
Third, you must cultivate a practice of relentless curiosity. You need to deliberately inject new ideas into your brain on a constant basis. This means reading books outside of your normal industry. It means having deep conversations with people who hold entirely different worldviews than you do. It means studying art, history, science, and philosophy. Your output can only ever be as good as your input. If you want to produce brilliant, innovative work, you cannot survive on a diet of shallow information and cheap entertainment. You have to feed your mind with high-quality raw materials. You must become an absolute sponge for knowledge, constantly seeking to understand the underlying mechanics of the world around you.
Fourth, you have to learn to embrace the concept of stepping into the void. The void is that terrifying space between where you are right now and where you want to be. It is the blank page, the empty canvas, the unlaunched business plan. The void is where fear lives, but it is also where all of your untapped potential resides. You have to train yourself to walk into the void daily. You have to sit down and do the work, even when you don't feel inspired, especially when you don't feel inspired. Inspiration is a luxury for amateurs. Professionals go to work. You have to embrace the discomfort of not knowing exactly how things are going to turn out, and trust that the process of making will eventually lead you to the solution.
Finally, and perhaps most importantly, you have to keep your own mortality front and center in your mind. This is not meant to be morbid or depressing. It is meant to be profoundly clarifying. The Stoics called it memento mori. Remember that you must die. When you constantly remind yourself that your time on this earth is strictly limited, it strips away all of the trivial nonsense that consumes so much of our daily lives. Suddenly, the fear of what some stranger on the internet might think of your work doesn't seem so important. The desire to stay comfortable and avoid taking a risk seems foolish. When you view your life through the lens of your own inevitable end, you realize that there is no time left to hold back. There is no time left for petty arguments, for ego-driven drama, or for hiding your true self from the world. There is only right now.
Dying empty is the ultimate act of gratitude for the life and the talents you have been given. It is saying to the universe, I recognize the value of what I hold, and I refuse to let it go to waste. It is a commitment to continuous growth, relentless execution, and fearless generosity. It means pouring your love into your family today, not tomorrow. It means starting the project today, not next year. It means speaking the truth, creating the art, and building the legacy with a profound sense of urgency. When you reach the end of your days, you do not want to look back and see a mountain of unfulfilled potential. You do not want to realize that you spent your entire life mapping and never actually making. You want to look back and see a landscape that has been thoroughly transformed by your effort. You want to see that you gave everything you had, that you held nothing back, and that you squeezed every last drop of brilliance out of your mind and your soul. The graveyard has enough wealth. It does not need your unwritten books. It does not need your unlaunched ideas. It does not need your unexpressed love. Keep that wealth out of the ground. Pour it into the world while you are still here, breathing, fighting, and creating. Produce your best work. Face your fears. Shed your ego. Step out of your comfort zone. Do not take your best work to the grave. Die empty.